So the reason I wasn't seeing many women, that the men did the shopping and the women were behind the compound walls. One contemporary Afghan writer has insisted that it was never meant to be a prison but a garden. Still, a woman could not go outside without a male escort. My garden became a great refuge for me from the excitement and stress of learning to cope with the overwhelming male world beyond the gates. There was a garden of dahlias outside our bedroom window and also a row of mature pine trees along the back wall. When there was a breeze, they sighed exactly the way they do on the Maine coast, where I grew up. I wrote many of the letters that ended up in my memoir, seated in that garden. There were several little girls, all about the same age, in the compound directly across the street from us, and they waited for Catherine to emerge. She blended into their world so effortlessly that I recently asked her, how did you all communicate? In the international language of play, she's replied. When asked today what she learned from her time in country, she tells people the meaning of true generosity. My special friend had so little, but she took off one of her bangles and placed it on my wrist. I still have it. I've also long wondered if there were two families or two wives in that compound. There were so many children of the same age. I met one man coming and going. He was very pleasant, dressed in Western clothes even, but I never saw a woman, even in Chablis. Catherine told me that she too wondered, so she got Chris to go up on her roof so she could see over their compound wall. Indeed, there were two moms. She then asked Anwar about it, and he gently explained to her satisfaction that yes, there were two wives, but he had to treat them both equally. At age 10, she had done her own research. At the end of that first summer, John Wickland from the Peace Corps staff office asked me if I would fill a slot for ESL, English as a Second Language, teacher in the Moisey Nest Swan. This was a women's institute that had been set up by members of the royal family for women who did not complete school before getting married. I was delighted to become one of those Americans who rode a bicycle to a Peace Corps assignment. All PCVs had them, even the 70-year-old retired doctor and his wife. We were working in the country without guns, riding bicycles, and were only fearful about the packs of street dogs that roamed at night. Some of the Peace Corps girls carried baseball bats in their bike baskets to scare them off. As I was looking for the entrance the first day, an Afghan woman drove up in a chauffeured limousine. We talked on the steps for a while. She had lived in an apartment in New York City while her husband was at the UN. She loved the convenience. She loved the convenience of New York, everything so available nearby. But then she lamented, oh, I had no time for myself because I had to do all the work myself. Well, I knew that one. She told me that many women came to the Institute to get away from their mothers-in-law or to combat the loneliness of their husbands studying abroad. Her words helped me identify the motley crew I taught, about 20 in all. They ranged in age from the teenager who had just gotten engaged and it had become the policy to move them from the public schools to the Moisey because it was such a distraction from the other girls. The oldest one was a maiden lady who in very sensible shoes and wool skirt and sweater, and with her shadri over the back of her seat. She was the only one in the class who did wear it. One day, a messenger came from the director's office. There was a TV crew from Poland, and they would be coming in shortly. As soon as Miss Miller heard that, she came up to me and said, please, please, may I be excused? And I nodded that it was okay, I got it. She rushed back, got her shadri and her books, and scurried away down the corridor. Although there was no TV in Afghanistan, the thought of someone somewhere seeing her face was just too overwhelming. There was one girl I called the Prime Minister because I thought this girl could be anything in the future. She was obviously very well educated already, didn't need any English lessons, and carried a big bulging bookcase, a book bag full of books. Sometimes I had to use her as a translator because I arrived at school one day and there was no class. So the next day I was slightly put out because, for them it was just power and A's, it doesn't matter. So they wondered why I was upset. So I got her to help me clear that up. I said, well, there are many things I could have done with that time. I could have done things for my own children and so forth. So I was so touched that they did take that in, and forever after, they told me when there was not going to be a class. There were many questions I couldn't answer. One girl wanted to know how she could keep her figure. She said, you've had 3 children and I've only had 1, but she had absolutely no muscle tone. But I knew from visiting with Peace Corps volunteers that they had a lot of difficulty starting a sports program because the girls didn't want to get out and get sun. But what really bonded us was the day I brought Gregory to class. Afghan schools operated in the summer and closed in the winter when the buildings were too cold. So Gregory's school hadn't started. And so he was used, as the youngest, he'd always been used to going places with me. So he said, could he come to school with me? And I said, okay. I didn't take the bike that day. I took my little VW. And as soon as we walked in, and there was a little clutch, of women chatting together beforehand. This woman grabbed Gregory to her bosom and just stroked him, and the other ladies who were mothers stood around waiting to hug him. And I stood there wondering how they're going to take this. And one woman looked around at me and said, he's not yours, he's ours. So they really love children. They really love children. And in a country where so many children die early of contagious diseases, they are really treasured. Needless to say, he didn't want to go to school again. One day I took in a Time magazine Walt had brought back. On the cover was a photo of bumper-to-bumper traffic. Because there was one girl who was always despairing because there weren't many cars in Kabul. And I tried to tell her, there's a downside to this. And I showed her the picture, but she just glazed over. She didn't see it. And then I realized that, the paradigm has changed from seeing to believing is believing to believing is seeing. Unless you believe something is possible, you can't see it. Today, one cannot see the sun in Kabul for the polluted haze that comes from vehicles and generators burning diesel fuel. What I loved about my Afghan experience is it took me back to my childhood, growing up on the coast of Maine before World War II, in a world with few automobiles and no TV. Families made their own fun, and in summer there were extended family picnics. Afghans, too, spend long Sundays picnicking. Finally, I connected with an Afghan woman who lived in our neighborhood and began to feel a part of that Afghan community, included in picnics. The Ghazis had many, outside Kabul was a large public gardens, and also there was a section where families had small private walled gardens. The stream ran through. It was a wonderful place to go in the hot, dusty summer days of Kabul, and I really appreciated that. I tried to remember how I met Fatima. I must have been told about her beauty salon. It was, you got it, behind her compound wall, in the front room of her modest home. In a world with no street signs or house numbers, a little child in the street could take you to your location if you knew the person's name. It was a harbinger of changes in the wind when a dressmaker shop owned and operated by a woman and employing 3 seamstresses opened in the nearby Blue Mosque Bazaar with a window so the seamstresses were visible to the street. Fatima had a marvelous sense of humor. When I passed a stylish woman coming out as I was going in, Fatima laughed and told me that there was a member of the royal family. Everyone in Kabul is related to the royal family but me, she said. Her husband worked in one of the banks and they had spent several years in London. I went down to Pakistan to catch the boat in my shagri, she wanted me to know, which she did not wear anymore, of course. Like a barber shop, a beauty salon is a perfect place to learn about a community. Besides, I liked her. Walter was puzzled about our friendship. I found this a puzzling question until I realized he was living in a parallel universe. He had to deal with dozens of government officials. They all spoke, depending on where they had their advanced education, either French, German, or English, in addition to the local languages in Afghanistan. Walter had been born in Germany, moved to Belgium at age 5, and fled to America at age 10, so he spoke all 3. Many of these officials wanted to learn something from him, wanted something from him. For a while, it was an American secretary. The Peace Corps obliged and sent a few American secretaries to train the first Afghan women who were ready to work outside. But the Afghan officials simply wanted an Afghan secretary for prestige, so they didn't give the American secretaries any chance to train the Afghan women, and they quit. But they still pestered Walter, and he finally said, I am not running a Kelly Girl agency. I thought of Fatima and myself as the same. Wives, mothers, lovers of dance, outspoken, although she was an entrepreneur and I was not. So finally I told Walter, well, in answer to his question, well, we both came from small, out-of-the-way places and went out to the larger world. When there was no business going on, we hung out. Time in Afghanistan was not like a swiftly rushing river. It was more like a lake that you sat beside or floated on, watching the clouds drift by. When we got back to New Jersey, Catherine was so homesick for Afghanistan for a while. She said, the teachers are always telling me to hurry up next year. You're going to high school next year, then you have to hurry up because you'll be going to college. She said, I want to go back to Afghanistan where time doesn't matter. Fatima talked about her own culture shocks in Kabul. In Kabul, every property had its own well. When she and Raouf went to Washington, D.C., they went to a different restaurant every day because they were trying to find one that had good tasting water. But she said they were all the same. They didn't understand that they didn't have wells. It was municipal water. One morning I found her distraught. Her brother lived in Mazar-i-Sharif, even further away than Bamiyan. He was ill and she wanted to go see him, but it was not possible to go alone. I'll go with you, I volunteered.